Hello everyone, Vovashkonda here, and today I would like to tell you the story about one of my most beloved cities in Ukraine, which is Kharkiv. Personally spent there about 2 years while I was during my studies, and I actually kind of feel that this is now my second hometown city or something like that, because I think most of the people during their student times, university times, can starting to feel the grasp of the cities where they moved to, where they're in now, and have some usually warm feelings toward it. Today I would really like to talk about all the touristic sites and maybe some places which are not necessarily considered to be touristic, but I'm a big fan of them myself, and just something to take a note about. And maybe during your 1-2 day trip to the Kharkiv you'll be able to cover everything and just enjoy the city as it is, and I hope you will be really glad about spending your time in such a place. I want to start with I think it's the oldest quarter of the whole city. It's called Poltava Bay and its surroundings. So basically a lot of traders during the old times, maybe 15th, 16th century, probably later. I think Kharkiv was later, probably more like 17th century. It was one of the main roads which was going to another big town at that point of time, which was Poltava. Thus the way called Poltava Way, the street. And basically most of the traders had their shops there, had their houses there. That's why there is still a lot of this old architecture that was left from the old times. So there is more like brick buildings, in more of a traditional older Ukrainian architectural and Ukrainian and Russian at the point architectural styles. Some of them are still in good conditions, thus it can be still interesting to at least visit them and take a look. But unfortunately, I think the first thing that you'll pay attention to when you go on this way will be that there are so many advertisings and like the street signs, and it doesn't have like their strict code of how it all should be organized and look. That's why it looks a bit of like a grotesque. It can be a beautiful building in old style, but painted in some weird ass color, or there is a really ugly sign on it saying that we change currencies here, or whatever it is. Some of those buildings are still in more or less okay conditions, but some of them, unfortunately, to my biggest regret, some of them already in really terrible state. And I think I saw one of them which was completely ruined because it was old and not well maintained. And there was even saying on the building itself that don't make it happen to your future, please take care about your past, and something like this. Quite a cheesy saying, but I think it says a lot about how we should sometimes preserve those small things from our past, which are still they just make sense to preserve, And I think if the local municipality would take bigger care about that part of the town, it will just make the Kharkiv a more beautiful, more interesting touristic place to visit, place to go. So yeah, there are a bunch of different houses in that street, and basically if we kind of start in the way from the main railway station, and then we go through Poltava Bay, and technically we will appear in something that I'm not sure whether it's official name, but I would personally call it triangle of three churches, and I'm not even sure what the official English name would be of all of them, but there is Blagoveshensky Собор, which is like Holy Words Church or Cathedral, something like this, which is, at least to me, it looks quite new and sleek. I'm not sure when exactly it was built, but it's definitely well maintained. It actually has this interesting striped pattern on it, which is quite cool to see, and it's not really common in most of the churches, as they usually go in just one unified color. There's another one with a big bell tower, which I think called Alexander's Bell Tower, and the church honestly don't remember. I'll put the name somewhere here, the white one. And there is another one which is technically part of the monastery, and this is Sviato-Uspensky Monastery, I think. So yeah, well, the monastery, and technically in between those you also can cover the embankment of the river of, I think it's either Lopani or Kharkiv. So around the same part, close to embankment, there is also a park with the with the funny small replica of Erasmus Bridge from Rotterdam. And besides that, in this kind of a historical museum whereabouts, there are a bunch of interesting old use or like early uses of architectural styles. It's the time when Stalin was the ruler, so a lot of buildings were built in this pompous style. They were like, some of those buildings are still around, and if you go all the way up through the historical museum, there is like a square called Square of Constitution, and that's where you'll be able to see some other buildings, like there are theaters, there's also a museum, and this is also the place where the main street starts, which is Sumskaya Street. If you'll be following that street, you'll be able to cover quite some other sites. And besides just the good old building that are standing there that can just catch your attention, on the way from Constitution Square to Freedom Square, which is the main square of the whole city, you'll be able to see Hatop, which I think is personally my most favorite theater in Kharkiv, not because of the repertoire that they have there, but mostly the way it looks. First, it's such a brutalist, ugly, squarey building, but it actually has this kind of a powerful energy in it, and when you take a look at the Hatop, you kind of feel that, okay, this is something that just needs to be there. Unfortunately, it just covered in all those ugly announcements, and not necessarily it's about the theatrical repertoire, but about other places like new movies coming out or something like this, it doesn't really help to unveil this brutalist beauty of that building. On our way further, we'll basically see the gorgeous Shevchenko monument, sculpture, I don't know, something like this. Basically depicts the story of early 19th century when Shevchenko was exactly alive, and he was like this poet of the revolution and of the Ukrainian movement. So basically, besides just him, there are also fellow Ukrainians are depicted that who were fighting at that point of time for the independence of the country. And then we basically making our way to the Freedom Square, which is, I think, one of the biggest squares in the whole Eastern Europe, or even Europe. Maybe it's the biggest. It's definitely huge, especially the moments when nothing is there, which unfortunately this time for me wasn't the case, as there was the Christmassy times around Christmas and New Year, so there was a lot of stuff in it, and people were just stuffing themselves with food, playing around at some attractions, and there was also an ice skating rink, so you wouldn't really admire the size of the whole square at this point of time. But that's the place where you'll be able to see the main university building of Karazin National University, which is exactly the place which is my alma mater. There are two buildings of it symmetrically from on the left and the right side of the Freedom Square if you look at it, and there is also in the center there is Держпром, which is like a governmental administrative building which basically governs a lot of different industries and economical things in the region. Then if we'll continue on following the way to Sergeant Yar, which is in my view the greatest park that there is in Kharkiv, we'll be able to see the statue of Kharko. So it was like a Cossack at the point of a time, and it's considered to be that the whole city is named after him. So he's like the local national hero. All the way forward through the Science Avenue, we'll be getting to Sergeant Yard, which is also close to Botanical Garden of Kharkiv. You won't be able to recognize when one started and the other one ended. I actually don't have much to comment about the whole park structure, but in my personal view, I think the way it's organized is quite modern, and the way it's maintained is also great. There are basically a few things to do in the park. There is European style children playgrounds, and there is also place to get fresh water. And all the way further, if you go in for the Sergeant Yard and will admire during this time how great and good park is organized and looks, you'll basically stumble into the funicular, which goes all the way from Botanical Garden to Gorky Park. If you'll just follow the trail up there, maybe in 15-20 minutes you'll get to this definitely Kharkiv people's personal best park of attractions and just way to spend your time. It's called Gorky Park. Try out to make something like a local Disneyland, Disney park, and I definitely see why children get so excited about getting there. I personally, I think, just started to change my mind more into admiration of the structure of Sergeant Yard rather than the way the Gorky Park is organized. Anyhow, it's still a great park and a good park to spend your time with your family, with your children especially, and I think it's also definitely well maintained and upkept, and definitely a shout out to whichever municipality structure is actually managing that park. And we're almost at the end of this improvised tour in Kharkiv on the main attractions. I think the part that a lot of people may miss, if you go more into deep through the Polytechnical University, also it has a great red building of it, you'll be able to get into Darwin Street. And Darwin Street is something that not really on the way of any driveways or something. It's more like this small, almost dead-end kind of situation, you know. There are some old houses that are actually in great shape. You definitely should go there and see what the Poltava Way could have looked if more money and more attention would be brought to those houses. I think it's a good example of what it can be, and also definitely like it's not in the best, like it's definitely not kept in the best way on Darwin as well, but it's still they're in good conditions. I think what also worth mentioning that besides those great architectural places and some points of attraction, there is also local street art artist called Gamlet, and I think his name is Gamlet Zinkowski or something like this, if I'm not mistaken. And he is making his street art in so many places around the city, and some of them were more controversial, and there were some controversies about people trying to get rid of them because they do not appreciate the art being on the walls of their houses or something like this. But besides the paintings, he was able to do some kind of installations as well with usage. I think the one I remember right now was with the old telephones attached to the top of the arc around one of the old houses as well. Yeah, it's more like this small gimmick, which I think if you will be really interested in this kind of art, maybe you can just, get the list of his works and just trying to go around the whole city, and this will be another amazing tour that you can do for yourself. So that's my quick review of Kharkiv. I definitely like the city, and I definitely would recommend everyone to visit it, and I will be glad to see more and more people just go in there, not for business, not for studies, but just, go there and chill and check it out. If you guys from Kharkiv, or if you've been there, please let me know down in the comments. What do you think about my review, and what do you think about the city itself? I would be definitely up to some further discussions. I definitely try to point out the main interesting places, and if there will be people who would be more into criticizing, I try to admit that, because I think a lot of our cities were some further critiques. I just decided not to put much more of my attention there. Yeah, with all the passion and love, thank you very much. Was Washkonda here, and bye.